So far away, Nisha. Why'd you pick this article talking about Shaka Zulu?
You know why.
That's a fucking name and a half, that, innit? Shaka Zulu, a name I really hope I'm pronouncing correctly because it's fucking awesome. Better known as Shaka Zulu or simply King Shaka, is a legendary, if what somewhat infamous figure in African history. A man whose ferocity and ingenuity in combat saw a small tribe of 1,500 Zulus taking over a vast swathe of Africa. A group of men the Zulu king honed to a deadly edge by, amongst other things, taking away their sandals.
So yeah, I think most people know of King Shaka.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even if you don't know much about African history, the name Shaka Zulu no doubt rings a bell in your head. One, because it's fucking awesome, and two, because he's very important to African history. He's like one of their most, legendary figures. It's important to note that before King Shaka arrived on the scene, the Zulu tribe wasn't all that well known. It was a small tribe that was largely insignificant and didn't really engage with the other tribes in all that bigger manner. It was only when Shaka Zulu went, fucking, yeah, let's go. The Zulus are about to, take over all this shit, is that, the Zulus were put, on the map, quite literally, because he took over, fucking 3/4 of it by the end of his lifetime. And something that makes Shaka Zulu even more badass is that he took the Zulu throne, not because of his bloodline, but because he was just that good at fighting, because he was actually the illegitimate son of the Zulu king. And I don't think anything sums up just how humble Shaka Zulu's beginnings were more than the fact that his name, according to legend, literally translates to parasite. Because the story goes that when Shaka's mother told the Zulu king that she was pregnant with his child, he told her that, no, you're not pregnant, you are just suffering complications from the Shaka beetle. And according to legend, when she gave birth, she named the baby Shaka as a nod to that. So his name literally translates to fucking parasite.
Oh, God.
And then he went on to lead the nation and control a fucking significant portion of Africa. Shaka Zulu was in no uncertain terms an absolute fucking unit. And while there's not much known about what he looked like or his build, he was said to be a very tall, stout man who was fearless in combat, which led to him developing a revolutionary technique known as stabbing people to death.
Okay, so what do you mean he invented stabbing people?
Well, around the time Shaka Zulu was just a young warrior, just one of the many among the ranks of his tribe, combat between rival tribes was largely limited to long-distance skirmishes, which involved the throwing of a spear known as the assegai. And Shaka thought this was stupid. It's why would you throw away your primary weapon and then give your opponent the opportunity to throw the weapon back? To the point where he refused to throw his spear at all and would instead close ranks with the enemy and use his spear to stab them up close. And remember, because the way people fought back then was to throw their spear, he was charging largely unarmed men who had no counter for this crazy-ass tactic of just sprinting towards them and stabbing them to death. And to him, that made sense. He's why would I throw away my weapon? Why would I not engage the enemy in hand-to-hand combat where I'm going to win? Because I can ensure that my spear finds its target.
So I'm guessing that led to him being put on the throne?
Yeah, because when the king died and they were looking amongst the rats, you're going to put that guy in charge, aren't you? You're going to put the guy who directly charges every enemy you've ever encountered and emerges unscathed with 50 dead bodies in his wake. And one of the first things that Shaka did when he took the throne was immediately command all of his troops to stop using the Isekai. So that weapon sucks. It sucks. It's terrible. We're going to use a new weapon called the Iklwa, which according to legend he invented, but historical experts have kind of poo-pooed that idea. It's he didn't invent this new weapon, but he did lead to it being widely adopted by his men. And the Iklwa was basically a shorter spear with a broader edge, more suited for stabbing. And what Shaka Zulu taught his men to do was throw the Isekai as a initial barrage to make the enemy hold their shields up in defense and then charge them with the other spear while they weren't expecting it. And this tactic was fucking unstoppable.
Just stood there without your spear because you've thrown it and then these men are just charging at you. You're what the fuck?
What do we do? They've got 2 spears. We never thought of this. How did we not anticipate the idea of needing a second spear? And Shaka Zulu was fucking fearless in combat, and he made sure his men were as well. And it was well known when he was in charge that if you did not win in battle and you return to the tribe, I will personally beat your skull in with a club.
God.
And that wasn't an idle threat, because if there was a battle where his men lost and returned to the tribe, he would bash their brains in on a rock with a club. And as you might imagine, that encouraged people to try really hard when it came to fighting. Yeah, and like that's one of the less savoury aspects of Shaka Zulu's reign. Like he was known for his brutality. Like you win or you die, but it nonetheless resulted in him commanding a fighting force that was one of the most fearsome on the entire continent. Because what the fuck are you gonna do?
Yeah,
they are literally going to fight to the death, and they are just so fucking crazy. They will just charge you straight away, second one. It's like Shaka Zulu's army, man. It's like the Riders of Rohan in the Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, where when they charge and they get 90% damage reduction. It's fucking, you can't stop it. Something else Shaka did was he immediately told all his men, take off your sandals. Because Shaka Zulu, when he was a young warrior, refused to wear sandals because he felt that the sandals just hampered his movement. And instead, he would walk across rough terrain and thorny ground to harden the soles of his feet so that he maintained maximum mobility and speed in combat. And that's one of the things he credited to his survival in countless battles. It's like, I am faster on my feet than the enemy. My feet are hardened and deadened to pain. I can move across any ground swiftly as possible. I don't need to stop for rest. And Shaka was so committed to this idea that wearing sandals in his army was punishable by death. If you wore sandals, you would be killed by being put across a rock and having your head beaten in with a fucking club. Because Shaka Zulu did not play.
The worst is socks and sandals.
Oh, man. Do you think if Shaka Zulu was transported into the modern day and he saw Crocs, he'd just lose his shit?
Yeah.
That he would be sent into just like a blood-drunk rage if he saw Crocs. And one of the things Shaka Zulu did with his men is make them march across just ground covered in thorns, rocks, and other hazards to similarly harden their feet so that they could just like march across any terrain like while ignoring the pain without the need for sandals. They had like maximum full mobility while doing so. And it's to the point where it's said that Shaka Zulu's standing army could march like 50 miles in a day and still battle at the end of it.
Jesus.
Like they could march 2 marathons in a day.
Makes me feel bad, like all I do is run up the stairs and I'm like knackered.
Shaka Zulu would be having none of that. Like Shaka Zulu would hate shag carpeting, that's all I'm saying. Like anything that comforts the feet, none of that. One of the things I love about Fact Fiend is that I can say stuff that sounds made up and it's true. Such as Shaka Zulu's brutal subjugation of all the other tribes in Africa can be directly attributed to him not wearing shoes. You can draw a line between not wearing shoes and success and put Shaka Zulu's face on it. And that's fucking incredible to me. Isn't that great? Isn't history awesome sometimes like that? People wondering about what happened to King Shaka. He died. He was beaten to death by one of his half-brothers, I think, and buried in an unmarked grave. Which is wont to happen when your claim to fame is just kicking the shit out of half of Africa and brutally slaughtering your own men for not listening to you. So it's good for battle, but it's not good for inspiring confidence. So, no. Yeah. Gutted to be King Shaka, I suppose. And far away, Nisha, I feel like we've not done a Photoshop in a while. So should we do one now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so like King Shaka, he was a pretty badass warrior. He conquered, a good chunk of Africa, thanks in part to not wearing shoes. But he's dead now. He's just chilling in African warrior heaven, and I feel like he deserves a bit of comfort. So let's try and get the best picture we can of Shaka Zulu behind us now. And there are unfortunately no real known images of him because he lived in a time before cameras, and nobody really drew what he looked like in his lifetime. So this is a best approximation of what Shaka Zulu looked like. But let's just put some nice fuzzy slippers on it. There we go. I feel better now. Like King Shaka, there you go. There's your nice fuzzy. But at the same time, let's take the same image over here. And remember, he did brutally beat a lot of people to death and was a somewhat reviled figure by the end of his reign. So now let's make sure he's got something uncomfortable on. And first things first, let's put King Shaka in some socks. And Nisha, what kind of socks can we make King Shaka wear?
I'm thinking the knee-high socks.
Oh, yes. Just night on the town, King Shaka Zulu. Let's go. That's the one.
Now you've got to put some sandals on him, because socks and sandals are like the worst combination when you have to do it.
So he's got some socks and some sandals. Oh, that's so rough. Oh, man, the two things that he hates the most, that's the worst. Oh, do you know what we need to do? Do you know what we can do now? Have you ever played Super Mario? Do you know that big floating boot you can climb inside of?
Oh God.
Can we put him inside of that? I know that covers up the stuff we just did, but it's really funny. It's like a big giant boot that Mario sits inside of. Can we please put him inside of that?
Inside the boot.
The thing is, though,
God.
I feel that would make him more powerful.
Oh, what are those shoes? I forgot what they're called. Them really big, chunky, gothic boots, like New Rocks or something. Put in some of them.
Oh man, we could put him in them, but like he's already inside the giant boots. Maybe we can put them on his hands. I'm not sure. Do you like put those big, giant goth boots on his hands? So he's like, he can just stomp everybody.
Oh God, yeah, if you punch someone with those on your hands, that would hurt.
If anything, we're making him more powerful. That's the thing, that boot in Mario, you can go over like any terrain, just like King Shaka did. We've just made him a stronger warrior. Like, he's going to take over all of, Africa Future Heaven with that shit. Look at him go. How are you going to stop him?